Hello and welcome to the Interpsycle Astrology YouTube episode here on Pluto in Aquarius. And today I'm joined by my very special guest and friend, the one and only Mel LaFara from Energetic Principles. Hi, Mel.
Oh, it's so great to join you, Shu, on your program. I can't wait to talk about Pluto in Aquarius. What a fun topic.
Oh, it's going to be big. It's the transit of the year or transit of the decade, in fact. So I'm so glad that you've agreed to come and have a chat with me about this and to enlighten the masses about because you know Pluto. You are a very you're very good friends with Pluto, I
Oh, best
understand. So.
friends. We have a love-hate relationship, which is very fitting. But yeah, I have know a little thing or two about the Lord of the Underworld.
All right. Good. So we're in for a treat. And so just Mel, you are the host of the Energetic Principles podcast, which is, one of my faves. And it's really nice to have you on my new show. So I'm really looking forward to, as an amateur, being in good hands here in podcast land with you and have you in the seat with me. So apart from your podcast, what else do you do, Mel?
What else do I do? Well, I'm a practicing professional astrologer and tarot consultant here in sunny San Diego, California. We were just talking about how it's always sunny in San Diego, and that is a blessing. And sometimes you don't know what day or year it is. So that is something I just love astrology. I love tarot. I love consulting. I love teaching, and of course, podcasting. And I'm also a musician, and I love creating music and working with scents. And that's a new thing of mine that I got into actually during the whole Mars retrograde process,
Right.
was getting into making like perfumes and homemade incense and things like that too.
Ah,
So
amazing. Yes, because you've been getting into your herbalism stuff, right? And
yeah,
trying to integrate
yeah.
that. Amazing. Well, we'll look forward to hearing more
So
about
many
that.
things.
You
Yeah,
are. You are that Gemini character, aren't you? Just
yep. Mars and
your hands in
Gemini,
everything.
just curious about everything.
Oh, well, so as you can see, Mel's a very multi-talented lady, and I'm so glad you're here to talk about basically the transit of the year, the transit of the decade, Pluto and Aquarius, where it will stay until 2043. So that's a 20-year transit that we're about to embark on. So we know that Pluto can bring a lot of change wherever it goes. So on the exact day that it goes into Aquarius, which is the 23rd for us. Is that the 23rd in the States?
It
For you,
is,
do you
yeah,
know?
yeah, it's one of those rare days where it actually is the 23rd
Aligned
for just about
for
everyone.
everywhere. Yes. So that is the
Yeah.
D Day for Pluto moving into Aquarius. And it has been in Capricorn since 2008. Well, basically, Pluto won't spend the whole year in Aquarius. It will only spend about 2.5 months in Aquarius, and then it will come back into Capricorn. And I'll have all the transit dates on my website, which I'll link into the show notes below. So for essentially from March to June this year, we get a big preview of what the next 20 years might bring for us as well as society. So um, let's start by breaking down, some general principles of Pluto. So Mel, what comes to mind to you when you think of Pluto?
Oh, Pluto.
Your friend.
Well, oh, Pluto. Well, Pluto is, it's a complex planet. It's complex within the individual and how we integrate it and work with it in our own personal sphere. It's complex with how it works within the collective. It is a planet that has to do with power and things that are decaying or that need that are taboo in a way, and that are peeking into the underbelly of something because there is something that is out of integrity or needs to have a light shown on it, but it's unpleasant, it's seedy, it is as they say with Pluto transits in particular, the only way out is through. And
Mhm.
there is but it gets you to the heart of something. It gets you to, much like Saturn in many ways, even though they're completely different planets, there's, Saturn, if we go through the hard work, there's a reward that eventually comes, hopefully, through those lessons and that effort. And Pluto's kind of the same way. It's like if we clear out and we look at the darkness, or we look at what's decaying or corrupt in some way, Pluto loves to bring up corruption. There's still gold there. There's still treasure. It's like kind of like wresting the treasure from the dragon, so to speak. But it's not always an easy process to get there. Pluto's very instinctual too. That's why when we engage with Pluto transits personally, it shows us maybe a darker side of ourselves, or something that we'd rather keep in the rug or in the closet, because that's a bit hard to deal with. It is the lord of the underworld.
Yeah.
It's a weird place down there. What about you, Shu? What do you think?
Yeah, like it is, like beautifully put, it is complex. And it's, to me, I think of that kind of Black Madonna archetype, having to raise the issues that are difficult to raise, but necessary at the same time, and may not always be the popular decision, or may not be always well received by others, but it almost just wants to bring things back into equilibrium all the time, Pluto. Whether you like it or not. And the great thing with Pluto is that, I love that statement of, the only way out is through, but there is that breakthrough with Pluto, where that renewal, that rejuvenation, and just when you think you were down and out, all of a sudden you come out even better than you were before. And it's that regaining of power that's really important to remember with Pluto. So no matter how tough it seems with the Pluto transit, and it can feel tough, like you're in a big hole and you don't know how to get out, there's always this search for the light, and that light eventually comes.
Well, isn't that the truth? That's a big part of it. Like there's a lot of inner strength, and we always hear, what's the number one buzzword for Pluto? Transformation. We're going to transform. We're going to metamorphose like the butterfly, and that can absolutely happen. But when you're dragged to the depths, when you put on the meat hooks, as we say, and stripped bare in some way, it really takes a lot within people, a lot within the populace to come up from that. And it is, we are moving towards the light within that, but not everyone makes it. That's the thing with Pluto, and we might not want to talk about as much, but not everyone makes it. And it is, so there's a character, or there's a nature to it that really plays on the depths of strength, like deep within, and being able to shed and get to that transformative place that we're talking about on the other side. Oh, do you agree,
yes,
Pop? Do you
I
agree?
know, my very plutonic underworld doggy. But yeah, and that's the thing too with the with the resources aspect of Pluto, because often it is associated with big money, as in big, like the financial markets, or monetary systems. It's all related to the plutocracy. It's Pluto, and so I find whether it's money or whether it's the well of your deep inner resources, like in some kind of way, Pluto always gets us in touch with what our deep resources are, whether it's intrinsic or material. So lots to see as it moves into Aquarius, as to what's happening with our financial systems as well. But before we sort of go into Pluto and Aquarius, I thought one way that we can better understand the nature of Pluto in that really embodied sense is to reflect on the time when we have that once in a lifetime Pluto square. And this usually, because we were just talking about how erratic the Pluto cycle is, but usually if you're, it usually occurs at the moment if you're in your mid-30s. If you're born in the 60s or 70s, it usually occurs in the late 30s if you're born in the 80s. And if you're born after the 80s, it won't happen till your mid-40s. And if you're a millennial, it won't happen until you're past your 50s, in your 50s. So a bit of a strange one. So without kind of revealing our ages, we can say we've both clearly been through our Pluto squares in our mid-30s.
I mean, look at me. Can't you tell?
Yeah, I know. Oh, goodness. But have you got any reflections either from your own personal life or even your client work that you have observed about typical Pluto square experiences, just to give us an idea of what that Pluto feels like in that everyday?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I have to preface that my Pluto square was a little more unique in the sense that I happened to be born on a full moon that squared Pluto. So when I got a Pluto square, I got the Pluto square, I got Pluto on my moon, I got Pluto opposing my sun, I got, it just all the works were going on. They're like,
Well,
what?
you
I think
had the
she needs
real essence of Pluto
yeah,
then.
they're like, we're gonna give her the real Pluto deal. Like, let's get her in there. But I think one of the things that really sums it up well is something that Sam Reynolds had given in a talk that had to do with the important transits of midlife. And he had referenced the Pluto square as ashes to ashes. And I thought that was kind of a brilliant way to put it because it is, I mean, we just talked about how Pluto confronts us with deeper parts of ourselves. It confronts us with what's out of integrity. It asks us to get real honest. It shows us maybe some seedy parts that we need to work on or fix or bring to the light or maybe go to therapy about, and chances are it's going to bring, as squares do, they tend to bring you some sort of crossroads where you can't go down both paths. It's one or the other,
Yeah,
and
true.
something dies off. It can be literally something in your life. It can be a part of you that is just no longer in integrity. And for me, I happened to be, that was when I was at the height of like pushing my music career. And I had this big dream that I was going to be, this musician. I was traveling the world and and it wasn't that I didn't have the talent or the focus or the resources or anything like that. It's just sometimes the universe has a little bit of a different plan or maybe shows you that you've been going about it this way, but that's actually you're biting yourself in the ass by going at it that way. And so
Oh,
I had
right.
a lot of things kind of fall through and I got redirected. And honestly, if it wasn't for my Pluto square along with Pluto on my luminaries. And at the same time, it just happened to coincide with a nodal return. And Neptune was doing, I literally got hit by the universe, like
You
punched
did.
me in the face basically at this time. But had I not gone through those big changes and lost some things and got redirected, and I wouldn't be sitting here with Shu today because it was actually the turning point that had me to pursue astrology full time and go into this field of work. So
Well,
ashes to
thank
ashes
goodness.
of that dream.
Exactly. Well, thank goodness for that, Pluto. I say thank you, Pluto, because yeah, you are a wonderful astrologer, and I guess you've got the best of both worlds in a way because you're still quite into your music now, and this is where Pluto can bring us back to our equilibrium. And you were reborn as another kind
I
of artist.
I literally wrote a song called Reborn.
Oh, did you?
And I didn't even think about it and it was yeah, and
Yeah.
it's funny how and it didn't happen at the time of the Pluto transits. But yeah,
It's
it's fitting.
It's fitting, yeah. Well, it's interesting because like, during my Pluto square, I drew an image a sketch that I was planning to paint, but I never did end up painting it. But it was just this sort of tethered mountain goat, in the kind of in an underworld scene, like tethered to rocks and bones all around it and stuff. And all it was trying to do was to climb up this rubble, like to the light, And I think there's this thing about looking for the light when you're in a Pluto transit. That's what it feels like. It feels like you're so stripped bare, like you said, that there's nowhere else but up to look at, and that it's that rock bottom feeling. And I remember drawing that, and it really felt so resonant to that time of my Pluto square. And I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going through a Pluto square, let's draw this. I was just drawing what I felt like I wanted to draw what I felt at the time, and it was this poor old chained up mountain goat trying to climb up, but it couldn't because it was tethered, and that, and that's also that image of Pluto. It's the bindings, like the strings attached to the oppression, and this is the complexity of it. It's like somehow you're intertwined into something that you can't get out of.
Yeah.
That can be really tough.
It can be really tough. And that's the thing with Pluto, is like the number one thing not to do is to fight it. Right. Because you're like, think about if like Pluto's coming down from the underworld and it's got your ankles and it's pulling you, you're just going to exhaust every single bit of energy. You're going to lose all your fingernails, like you're getting pulled down.
Exactly.
And there's nothing you can really do about it. And so that's why when we're talking about the only way out is through, it's like, okay, well, I'm being called to go through this process. Could have an initiation sort of energy that goes through it. So the tethering that you speak of is so real, because you're tied. You can't get away from it. Like you can't snap your fingers and it's over. You're going on a journey.
It's like if you want to, I had a knot in my dog chain lead the other day. It's a chain and there was a knot in it and I couldn't undo it. And, the only way to undo it was actually to go into the knot, to loosen it, to shake it up and to, really shake and, instead of pulling that tension. And that's what Pluto can feel like. So if you're feeling tethered, try and go into that tethering. To get out. And speaking of that kind of, the conundrum of Pluto, like when Pluto did last make its ingress into Capricorn, which is, all in our very sort of our lived experience in the modern day, we saw that Pluto's destructive force was sort of seen in the area of bureaucracies and big companies and government systems. Because that's what Capricorn rules. And looking back at the last 15 years, it's an example of what Pluto can do. It's like our whole economic government systems, the whole autocratic society has changed. And because Pluto was literally going in there and shaking it up and transforming it. So it basically wants to completely destroy and rebuild wherever it goes. So so now that we see Pluto going into Aquarius, the sign of our humanity, our technologies, the social systems, the brother and sisterhood, what do you see Pluto's intensity sort of impacting over the next 20 years?
Well, it's interesting, Shu, because God, you gotta give it up for divine timing, right? Like there's just, the cosmos just has a special way about it, because, as you mentioned, this Pluto and Capricorn transit since 2008, and here we are about to go into an even longer one with Pluto and Aquarius. We're also at this unique period of time where we have fully exited the Earth age, with having, a couple hundred years in Jupiter and Saturn meeting to create, these Earth conjunctions. And in the end of December 2020, we had Jupiter and Saturn meeting in air, where actually Pluto is about to be here with our 0 degree Aquarius point. But it was a conjunction that was starting a whole air age. And so granted, Pluto moving through both Capricorn and Aquarius does not happen every day. It's been a handful, 100 years. But there's something even more poignant about this particular time period and this interchange between the two signs because of those ages switching. So how does that bring us into, this 20-year cycle and like what we might see there? Well, it's fascinating to think, right? We saw the whole breakdown of material realities, whether it is these big corporations or housing situations and money, gaps between what people have and what people need, resources to live, our climate change, planet, like all this very Pluto showed us what was out of integrity in a very tangible way. Well, Aquarius is that, there are back-to-back Saturn signs, which is just interesting in itself. But Aquarius is I think of Aquarius as reform. How do we make a better society? What is our society? What's the strategy that we have to live here on this planet? What's our constructs? How are we using, obviously we live in a world that's steeped with technology, and we're just starting the air age. We're just starting it. And it feels like we're already like so embedded in social media, and that's all the tech that's around us, and the big corporations that can,
Right.
are all
How
about
could it
it.
get any more? How could we get
How,
more teched up? It's hard
how
to think.
it is hard to think, but that's the beauty of Pluto running through here, right? Because we talked about this when we were going through Pluto characteristics, is Pluto exposes. Pluto wants to show what's corrupt. Pluto wants to show where you're like, yeah, that's not the way to do it. Like so we're going to go through, even if we're going to be in this air age for, a couple hundred years, there's this weird blessing / curse where Pluto is going to go through the sign and really, like, let's think about this. How does this benefit the whole? And if it doesn't, we're going to expose it and get it into integrity. So obviously we're going to see a massive tech changes. We're going to see how tech and social media and virtual realities and things like that affect us as humans, especially in our mind space and our mental capacity.
Yep. And even chips in the body and things like that. It's all fits the symbology, doesn't it?
Don't you put a chip in my body. You don't get I'm not a robot. But no, but that's the thing, is like we're trying to, and that, that's a big part of this transit too, is like a lot of people envision us to have a better world in this AI reality. Like let's automate this. Let's have a robot do this job. Let's get chat GPT, which you'll have some fun things to share about that, to write this for us, or to feed through resumes so no one actually has to look at them. But how intelligent is that intelligence? Is it really serving us? And also, if it does take all this off our plate, then once again, where do we go from here? What's the human's role?
I think it's about
that.
questioning what it means to be human over the next 20 years.
Yeah.
From our physical bodies, when it's full of maybe implants and all sorts of weird stuff, to, what our role is in society, now that all the tangible, earthy kinds of jobs are taken over. What do humans do?
Well, and it's not even just the tangible jobs, it's the intellectual jobs. Like if AI wants to write copyright or be a research analyst and sort through data, that's the interesting part, is like automation first kind of came for the blue collar jobs. And now it's kind of coming for the quote unquote white collar jobs.
So true. Yes. Yeah. And I also see, because of the community aspect of that Aquarian energy, that we may see possibly things like decentralization of currently shared assets within the community, like more decentralized power or decentralized utilities and things like that. People becoming more autonomous in their ways of managing their own worlds and their own sovereignty. So the fact that this is a Saturn ruled sign, and Saturn in Capricorn is more, about the structure, whereas Aquarius, I see Saturn more as the visionary of, what possibilities in the future. I just think there's going to be some big changes in the collective way of managing our shared assets and resources together. What's a better way? Like, is it monopolies are out now, with Saturn moving out of Capricorn.
Get them out of here.
Exactly. So like we've seen with the shakeup in the financial worlds, from the global financial crisis to the move towards more decentralized monetary systems. And I think that's only going to grow more in the future, although it's taken a bit of a backward step, with the whole the Bitcoin saga, but it's definitely still, I think, part of the narrative.
Yeah, and I think that, well, and that's a big thing that will definitely come into play when we get into one of the hot spots of Pluto being in Aquarius, and that's when Saturn moves through Taurus and makes a square to Pluto in like 2028, 2029. So it's almost like you could kind of think about Saturn Uranus square that we just went through. But these two signs are going to be triggered once again in these, money positions. So I think you're absolutely right about that. And the saga is not over. But it's only just begun,
It's only just begun, and we've got that little preview, just a 2.5-month preview, but a little microdose of what's there to come.
A microdose, how perfect. Yeah. Well, and I think that one of the big parts about this, and my my positive side about it is, we've really gone to this place, especially being on Zoom. Here I am in Southern California talking to Shu in Australia. But especially through the pandemic, we've gotten even more to this place of just like globalization and this larger collective. And I think that one of the beauties of Pluto moving through Aquarius is hoping to get more attention into the local community, because community has gotten so big. Community has become collective, but there's so much power in local communities coming together, especially when we talk about resources, and having, especially when there are systems and structures that break down where we aren't getting the power, the food, or the supplies. It's like, well, because maybe it's a little too far out.
Yep.
And so how do we come together as more localized communities to not only be able to support each other with these resources and these well-functioning systems, but also give the thing that we want most out of life, and that's connection. People want to feel connected.
We
even
are
the most
in that
hermit
air
of
age.
hermit wants to be connected,
And that's the beauty of the air age, right? That we're sort of heading into. It really is about connecting through our minds, connecting through our social structures, that kind of thing. So it's this whole kind of relocalization kind of project that's going on there with Pluto going into Aquarius. Yeah. So let's look backwards a little bit, and we don't really have a lot of examples because, last time Pluto went into Aquarius, it was 248 years ago. And I'm pretty sure none of us were around in this lifetime, but there were some huge things that dropped in the last instance of Pluto in Aquarius between 1788 and 1790. That time of revolutions, the American Revolution, the French Revolution. We also had the settlement of the first British fleet of convicts in Australia. So lots of lives were changed. Lots of lives were changed. We're all kind of, America, Australia, both are going through a renewal of this cycle. Sorry about my dog. I hope you can't hear him.
He's like, I have things to say about Pluto and Aquarius. Listen to me.
Exactly. Thinking of these revolutions, I'm just interested to hear, I guess, not so much a history lesson, sorry, about the American Revolution, but more around the Pluto signatures that you can draw from, say, the events of the American Revolution.
Yeah, and I think we see it in the American Revolution and in the French Revolution, and even at that time there was the Haitian Revolution that took place too, which was like the largest successful slave revolt. And one of the big things that all these rebellions had in common were separating from some dominating power. Especially here in America, there was this sense, once again, it kind of come back to this like localized community, right? They're like, oh, wait, you over there in England. Well, England was the big offender, but there's England, France, the Spanish, the Dutch, everyone had these controlling interests to this land. And it was like, you're going to tell us what to do on this local level, and you're not even here experiencing this life. Like, we're gone rogue. We're doing our own thing. Like, what what business do you have here? Especially when you're going to come in and be like, I'm going to tax this, or I'm going to restrict that, you know? And so there was like this common people that were like, no, I am not going to succumb to your power that has gotten out of control and doesn't even fit where we are. And the same with the French Revolution, where the the disparity of the people in relation to the the monarchy and the aristocrats. And the thing that's fascinating about all this whole time period, especially in France, is what it created. Even though it went through the revolution of terror, the reign of terror and all that, like got pretty bloody and pretty gnarly out there. But what it did was it redistributed power to create a middle class. And that's a big thing about these whole revolutions, is to kind of bring back these powers to the community, the power to the people, to create not this big bubble, like that's one thing with the whole Pluto and Capricorn. What did we start to see? The 1%. We see the 1%. So we're seeing these same themes to come around. And one of the, there's how many articles out there on the interwebs these days talking about how the middle class is disappearing. We're being expunged out by power, greed, money, big monopoly dynamics. And so there's a theme there.
Yeah, that shifting of power. Yeah, and same thing with the arrival of the first fleet in Australia. All of a sudden, the indigenous cultures here lost all their power, and their lives changed forever until even today. There's still issues that have that are being experienced today, which is a sad thing. So hopefully this Pluto in Aquarius might end that kind of cycle for them and start a new one. Who knows? But I know, just from all of the American astrologers that have been talking about it last year, about that first Pluto return. So this is that, cyclical Pluto going back to its original birthplace. So what kinds of real life events did you see in the States around this sort of first Pluto return? Like, did you notice anything sort of significant, just in terms of like, even simple real life examples of what that first Pluto return brought?
Well, I think it brought up a lot about, even think about the racial issues that came up, and the George Floyd incident, and bringing, the people that have been marginalized more into the framework here, right? It's like showing it's diversifying who is here and what they deserve as people and humanity, and how we have power and constructs that have been in such a strength for so long that they're so corrupt. They're so going about these same ways, and it's affecting the same groups of people, and it's affecting the whole and the unity of the country, right? And it's just exposing it, right? Just because it's returning. But that's the thing with returns that are always so interesting, is it's like it gives you the new chapter starting, but there's not the solutions. There's not so what's it doing? It's showing us like the whole thing with the police force and how corrupt it is. And back to the decentralization issue, get rid of the cops. They're built on these faulty systems to begin with, to keep people that are marginalized down, and just like the continual exposure of how bad our political system is, and the facade of freedom that can live there, and which is a big thing, I think, when we're getting into Pluto and Aquarius, right? Aquarius, it's a very freedom oriented sign in its own way. And
Pluto, there's no facades with Pluto. So if there is a facade happening there, Pluto will definitely shatter that mirror. It's not going to keep that up at all.
So it was all those things, and it's even things down to very basic stuff that's very Capricorn and Aquarius as well. It's like infrastructure, and how the actual the roadways we've built and the cities we've created, and how what we built And
Did
it's
you see a
literally crumbling.
decaying? Yeah, a decaying of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so right. So that's a pretty big shift for the States. And um like speaking of the topic of say revolutions, we also experience another kind of revolution as well on a Pluto and Aquarius transit, and that was the Industrial Revolution. So I guess this was that technological aspect of Pluto and Aquarius where at the time it was that move away from sort of the artisanal craftsman kind of machines ways of making things to machines that mass produce and making rise for this consumer age that we live in now. So that topic of technology is definitely a big one for Pluto and Aquarius. Like, you mentioned a few things before, Mel, but, do you want to speak a little bit about, some of your thoughts around, the pros and cons of the technological revolution that we're about to head into?
Well, it's it's yeah, I think it really, and we've already kind of touched on this, it really gets back to like the human's place within that, and not being able to go, the more that we revolutionize our science, our medicine, our abilities to manufacture things, where does that leave us as people? That's the thing, is the system, the structure has to change within it. So bring on the advancements. I'm all about it. We think about Pluto being the planet of death. There's it makes me wonder if there's going to be a lot of push into this sort of like eternal, so not that we'll be here forever per se, but that's a huge advancement that's happened since the last time Pluto's been in Aquarius. We're living for much longer.
Much longer, the immortality of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, how
And
much longer do we want to live?
how much longer do we want to live? And well, and that's the thing, is that's a big bonus too, because Aquarius is a scientific sign. It really deals with technology, with science, with data and data processing. But like one of the big things with AI that I really think is gonna help is the being able to use it to research faster and get faster results and make quicker medical and like bioengineering breakthroughs
Yes.
that maybe can help us live longer, but also get us in and out of sickness faster. Or
True. And
so
it's
it's a
funny you
plus.
say that because I did actually use ChatGPT to try and research, um, make my research faster on this Pluto and Aquarius.
Go,
I don't
go.
think it was any faster. It just like
Yeah.
put me into another wormhole that I spent more time than investigating. But, it's still very interesting. And I think we'll see, the pros being, the advancements, the speed of information coming at you, but also, what's the quality of the information, and what's the risk that it can produce, like with all this artificial mind thinking aspect from it.
Well, and so here's the thing. Here's the potential positive, but also the potential negative. So right now, when we look about artificial intelligence, we only have what is known as like narrow AI, and narrow AI is created by us. So basically, anything that's artificial intelligence, it is just all of
Yeah,
our data
yeah,
collected.
just categorized.
It's just categorized, it's spitting out here. And so they have, the vision of one day having general AI, which is actually intelligent, sentient, conscious AI. And a lot of people don't know if that actually can exist or not. And even if it does, that's a whole can of worms in
It is.
itself. So there's an interesting thing with the narrow AI and realizing that, like you said, like Chat GPT thought could help you out, but he sent you down this own wormhole, and it's not necessarily giving us anything new per se. If anything, we're learning a lot. The AI is currently in these early forms. I say early forms because it's been around for many years now, but it's still very early in its conception, what it's doing is it's teaching us a lot about ourselves, right? And this is where that Pluto bit comes in. Like Microsoft, I think it was like last year, or maybe it was in 2020, they did this thing where they put an AI bot girl on Twitter and gave her an account and had people interacting. And they had to take it down within like 24 or 48 hours because she had turned racist and was bringing up the Nazis, and like because people were like bringing the right thing, and so so they
Yeah,
had to take it away because it started bringing up all this Pluto stuff.
exactly. You don't know what sort of monster you're creating with it,
Yeah.
essentially. What I would love ChatGPT to do is to actually get into the minds of our great thinkers of the past. Like, if that's ever possible, like what would Socrates think about this? Or like, like even in the astrological tradition, what would Valens say about
Oh,
this? And
would
what
that be
would,
nice?
amazing. So yeah, there's a challenge there for the AI tech people. Like if you could do that, I'm all for it. But in the meantime, I did ask ChatGPT. The question was, what famous person in history was born with Pluto in Aquarius? And knowing that the last time that this happened was in the late 1700s, it spat out the answer of Barack Obama, which is clearly not right. And you had sort of confirmed that it was probably because he's got something to do with what was it? He's got
Aquarius rising.
Aquarius rising. Yeah, so that made kind of that connection and mash things together. And I corrected. I said, no, that can't be right because he was born too late. And then it said, oh, sorry for my mistake. But another person that was born with Pluto in Aquarius was Oprah Winfrey. And again, I felt a little bit more secure in my job as an astrologer that they can't replace us yet.
No.
But I eventually got the answer, which I thought was quite this is the answer that I was, something along the lines that I was looking for, was Franz Schubert, who's a composer, modern classical sort of composer from Austria, born in 1797. So that was clearly in the Pluto and Aquarius zone. And it said that he was known for his emotional expressiveness, lyrical beauty, and technological innovations in his musical compositions. So I thought, oh, that's interesting that he was known for being innovative in music. So I asked, well, how was his music innovative? And it brought up examples like extended harmonies, like adding notes to traditional chords to create new sounds. And so this sort of gave rise to more modern styles of, modern tones in music where, chords just weren't, the first, third, and fifth or things like that. We started adding more sort of, weird kind of harmonies into that made music more interesting. So that would have been quite weird at the time, like in the world of classical music. It also talked about modulation, so frequently changing keys more than the classical era would. And so that sort of created what it said, a harmonic instability and surprise. So that's very Pluto and Aquarian.
It does seem very Pluto and Aquarius. I love that.
Yeah. So, and it just said that he had innovative structures in his music. So I thought, well, I was happy with that answer, but it did sort of require a little bit of back and forth and feedback to ChatGPT. So maybe the next person that asks this question, ChatGPT might sort of, and it'd be interesting. To see how quickly that feedback loop sort of occurs. But yeah, have you got any examples of famous Pluto and Aquarian folks in the past?
I do, and I think even you just bringing up Schubert right now, and thinking about creating those new musical styles that added more, and how it might have been strange at the time, but it has a lingering effect, right? Because that's a big thing about Aquarius energy is like when it innovates, it can really stick, right? Because it's a fixed sign, it's a Saturn sign, like it can hold on. And so some of these influential figures that I dug up, really, to me, they created things that really stuck. Now the biggest one by by far in my mind is actually Muhammad, the prophet. Was born with Pluto in Aquarius. He's born in 571 AD, in Julian time though. So he had Pluto at the end of Aquarius.
Right.
And
That's so interesting.
yeah, and I mean, think about this figure. It's like, and that's the thing when you go back into the past Pluto and Aquarius transits, especially in like the 1500s, especially in 1054, when there was a big split of Christianity and what was known as the Great Schism. Like there's a really, because Aquarius deals with collective thought, right? And this kind of organization communally around that. So there is this big religious piece that seems to come out. And what I found fascinating about Muhammad, other than the fact that he's the prophet of Islam, which is like one of the biggest, religions on the planet there, he wasn't received very well at first for being this person who went out into the mountains and came back and being like, God's speaking to me, I'm a prophet, follow me.
A heretic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after having that hostility, he ended up taking his followers and they migrated to Medina in 622 in this event that was called Hijri. I might be botching that. But what's important about that is that actually marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. And that's a big thing with Saturn energy and Saturn signs, that's this concept of time that comes with it. And so here, this person's leading their followers in creating this whole calendar that these people still abide by. And even by the time of his death, he had converted most of the Arabian Peninsula to Islam and had united Arabia into a single religious polity.
That's really fascinating because I was looking at the fact that at the siege of Baghdad, when the Mongols invaded Baghdad, I think it was, the middle of the 13th century, that was just prior to Pluto moving into Aquarius happening. And that was essentially the end of the Islamic Golden Age. And so we had Pluto and Aquarius, the birth of Muhammad the Prophet, and then just, however many years, how many, 700 odd years later, when Pluto and Aquarius started, the Golden Age of the Islamic world had ended. So all happened. And this is one of the big things about, I think, Pluto and Aquarius that we've seen. It shows the cusp of two eras that we're walking through, doesn't it? Like the Industrial Revolution, all the other revolutions that we've spoken about, but also the fact that one of the important sort of cuspy kind of two age situations was this whole sorry, I'm botching that up. Nicholas Copernicus, that came up with the that theory of the heliocentric model instead of the geocentric model, right? So that completely shattered the world. I still feel almost, I must have been alive at that time because I kind of still feel the trauma from that myself. I still can't get rid of this geocentric model in my head because that's the way
that's how we look at astrology.
Exactly.
We are looking at it from geocentric.
Exactly. But I think more to that is the fact that it wasn't just purely about heliocentric, geocentric. It was more about moving away from animism, moving away from symbolism and spiritism in the sciences to a more scientific revolution, like dry facts about the real physical world. And that's great. It's brought, advances in technology and medical sort of advancements and things like that. But it also took away a lot of the, the ancient healing arts and the ancient systems that, that still, I think, has a valid place in the modern world. And it nearly killed astrology as well, had it not been for that psychological push to make it more scientific, I guess. So that was, this two worlds, being on the edge of two worlds, which is very Pluto and Aquarius, like bringing in some crazy, either through a crazy heretic or some crazy idea that changes like the whole collective thought, like you mentioned, is very Pluto and Aquarius, and we're heading into that. So I'm wondering whether we're sort of going back into the geocentric model. Maybe it's flat Earth.
I was like, oh, people still believe in this. It's a thing. It's a thing. And it's what's so interesting about when the Copernicus's book had come out in, I think it was 1543. It was the same time that there was a surgeon, Andreas Vesalius, I think his name is. He published a book called The Fabric of the Human Body, which had accurate diagrams of the human body. So it was kind of the first offering to modern anatomy. But what's interesting is all those things were coming out under a period of time that had a solar eclipse in Aquarius conjunct Pluto in the North Node. So it was, and like even when we think about Copernicus, it's like a lot of people think Copernicus was persecuted in some way for his thought of bringing heliocentric thoughts, but he wasn't. He actually, his book was published like less than a month before he died. He was in with the church. They had great things to say about him. Like it wasn't an issue. It was more Galileo that had to deal with it in the early 1600s. Ironically, when Pluto was in Taurus, when it had squared from that position. But there is these intros of different ways of thinking. Like a couple other influential figures with Pluto and Aquarius, which I found was kind of fascinating, were the Grimm brothers. The Brothers Grimm, who created all of the story and the fairy tales that would end up living in the mind of the collective to this day. We create movies around them.
Yeah, right. And it being a grim theme, like the seedy, shadowy nature of Pluto.
I know.
So
right? Because they were darker. Like you go back and read the Grimm tales in their like original form, and you're like, that is straight up horror. Who is right?
Exactly. Yeah, not one to read for the little kiddies before bed.
Yeah, they're definitely have Disneyfied them a little bit. Another one is like James or John James Audubon, who, if you know anything about the Audubon, especially here in America, they have the Audubon guides, and they're connected with. He basically did all this documentation for all the American bird species and their natural habitats, and identified like 25 new species. And you think about air signs being related to birds and the scientific element to it. And so he still has nature guides to this day, which is big.
That's a great example.
And the last one I'll share, like there's a handful more, but I think this one is fitting only because it actually ties into the time periods that came afterwards. Is Queen Elizabeth I was born. She was actually born at the very beginning of Pluto and Aquarius, because her father, Henry VIII, actually it was a big theme of the Pluto and Aquarius transit back in the 1500s, because of how he split off from the Catholic Church and created the Anglican, church for his own power and his own interest in divorcing a woman and then killing wives and all that stuff. But what's interesting about Queen Elizabeth and her reign is she did try to bridge the gap between the Catholics and the Protestants, which was a big thing. But number one, she was basically the beginning and the start of the colonial empire. So when you're saying, Pluto and Aquarius comes around and now we have these convicts being dropped off in Australia, well, how did all this start, right? We have this Pluto and Aquarius figure.
That last cycle. That's fascinating. Yeah. And so that would have been that would have been probably two cycles before.
That was she.
No, one cycle
1532 through 1553.
Okay, so then the next time would have been like the late 1700s. So yeah,
1777 through 1798. So
yeah,
20
right.
years.
So that was literally she started that colonial sort of cycle, and then it advanced to the spreading of the colonial cycle to
and what's interesting about her too, just one more thing, because I think this ties into our common day era, and what we might be seeing more of or trying to combat more of, is actually she was really free from religious zealotry and just wanted to keep stability in the land, right? And there's all these big ties to religious facts and separations and divides and things coming up during Pluto and Aquarius times.
It's being more rational, like the scientific revolution, it's moving away from the hocus pocus of, say, herbalism or like witchcraft magic and witch doctors and things like that, to more like facts and rational facts.
Well, and even like we're having a ridiculous thing happening right now here in the US where all these like Republican, probably Bible toting people are trying to basically stop like drag shows, like drag queen show.
Yeah.
And like there's this war on drag right now because they're trying to add this like piety sort of like, this is affecting our children or affecting our society, it's, and this is a big thing with politics here, especially in the US, is there's this big half of the faction is driven by this religious standpoint. And of course it's having money factored in and fed in by the churches, the evangelicals and stuff like that. And, and I think that corruption, right? And it's just a distraction from nobody else doing anything that's really important. I think these things are going to start to come up as Pluto and Aquarius, because it's like, you're not doing your job and you're defaulting to this religious thing that maybe only this many people abide by. And, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And again, it's kind of hitting all of these kind of subcultures or underworld, underbelly, or like taboo kind of topics. It seems
exactly.
Well, it's weird that it's just all of a sudden it's just come up now. We're starting to see the light, and we're I think over the next 2.5 months we're likely to see, keep your eyes tuned and your ears open for the omens and the symbols that you'll see of Pluto and Aquarius, because not that you should sort of buy into it or take action, but it's more like an omen that's a remembering of like the times that you're moving into, that this is the great unknown. And just like how Captain Cook felt when he was sailing into the Pacific Ocean all those years ago, like how scary would that have been, I mean, that was an adventure. And so now we're on this sort of edge of these two very different epochs. So, what are you most looking forward to, Mel?
What am I most looking forward to? It's funny because it's so immense of a transit that it's hard to tell. And of course, I look forward to things on a collective level, and then you think about your personal life, because that's a big thing. It's like, where's Pluto moving into your chart?
Exactly.
You just had it since 2008, hanging out in Capricorn. You got really intimate with Capricorn house, and so now it's coming for your next house. And I know both you and me, Shu, we have angular Aquarius. So we're like, can you just back it up here?
Feeling it already.
Yeah. But as far as looking forward to things, I mean, I've always been very interested in technology and advancements there. And
you're like just one of my tech kind of inspirations. Like, oh my God, Mel's so onto it.
I'm like, I just love getting that tech and those little gadgets and little things that do these and that. But actually what I'm kind of looking forward to most is the antithesis of that, as funny as that might sound.
Right.
Because I've been into it. This is my Uranian character speaking. I was born with Uranus on the ascendant. So that's when you have strong Uranian energy, you tend to be ahead of things in some way, for better or for worse. And so as people get into this tech age even more, I feel like one of the things I'm looking forward to is actually the detox from it. Because that's a very Plutonian thing too, right? This purification process. And I think that actually some of the benefits to this period is to detox us and purify us from the tech, from this social media. How do we still be these autonomous people that are living embodied in a natural world It's not virtual reality yet.
Yep. And how to weed out all the terrible things that are going on in that tech world, things that we don't like, how to compost all of that, essentially. That's what I'm hearing from you, like not to get rid of tech altogether, but like, how do we just make it better for us?
How do we make it better? How do we utilize it in a way that is very healthy for us and that we can get the most out of it, rather than bringing up all these issues that need to be dealt with? Also, I'd love to see innovation with alternative energy sources and being able to, I mean, Shu, you're a perfect example of that. You're out there living off the grid, in the bush out there.
So maybe people might be more empowered, I guess. Well, there is a lot of technology coming up now, and really the technology for solar power systems in homes, it's almost at a parity in some cases, price parity, but the function and the effectiveness of these systems, like it's almost like there's no difference to being on the grid. It's so much better now. So yeah, hopefully that empowers more people to power themselves and this is that decentralized power sort of situation that we might see, perhaps that would be good. Ease off the pressures of the planets. But I think what I'm hearing from you, Mel, is like this sense of equilibrium, like Pluto bringing things back to where it should be, like no matter how hard that process is. And that's certainly something I'm looking forward to. It's like, just bring it, like tell me where I'm, show me where all the challenges lie, and so that we can work through it. As you say, it's about going through it, not to go over it.
Not to go over it. And I think that, one of the big things is we started out this conversation thinking about the Pluto square, right? Well, us Pluto generations that are going to be an aspect to this are, the Pluto and Libra generation, like myself and you're Pluto and Libra, right, Shu?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. And so we're finally going to kind of come into this position where we have a little more ease with it rather than the square of Capricorn, but it's going to create that room for the Pluto and Scorpio people to come up and have like more of an impact that can drive deep change too, right? These are very powerful people. So we're talking about this equilibrium and this balance and this connection and compromise. And we're talking about this, let's go deeper. Let's look at what's really wrong, like what needs to be fixed. And so these people are going to come into power more, which I think is going to be beneficial.
Yeah. So there's that handing over the baton to the next generation of people to start coming into managerial roles and changing the world. So great. So I think we've covered it pretty well today, Mel, and thank you so much for sharing your insights. Sorry about my dog, if you can hear him.
He just wants to have his say,
I know. Dude, come over here. And so what have you got going on, Mel, that you would like to share with the audience? Oh, he's a bit of a singer.
He's like, oh. What do I have going on? Well, I always have the podcast going on, and there's some wonderful episodes happening over at energeticprinciples.com. The podcast itself is called Energetic Principles. There are always forecasts with guests who join me. I have a wonderful episode on Saturn and Pisces that just came out with Sam Reynolds, and about to have the Aries equinox with S.J. Anderson. And I'll be having my own Pluto and Aquarius program that comes out with Nicholas Polymenakos and Elodie Saint-Angebou from Ninth House Astrology. Nice. So there's some, there's a lot of resources if you're a podcast listener, which I think you might be if you're listening to us here right now. Totally. You can find me on... You can find me at Energetic Principles on Instagram. Although my posting has been spotty because I already feel the pull away from my social media detox, but on occasions you can find me there. And other than that, that's about all that's going on. I do hope to get back into teaching here this year sometime, but there is not a set date to that yet. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Mel, and always great to tune into your shows. And I'll have all the links in the descriptions below. And so for anyone that's interested, I'm also going to be on a panel with Kepler College for World Astrology Day. So this will be happening in the US 19th of March, in Australia on the 20th of March. So I'll put the details in the links below as well, and details are also on my website. It's a free event where Ray Merriman, Ona Dosa, Marie O'Neill, and I will be presenting some of our musings around transits of this year. So, the topic was quite broad. It was called, the topic of transition of power. So it's just my interpretation of that topic. So other than that, I'm also open for consultations. I will be doing more teaching with Kepler this year, as well as astrological mentoring as well. If you're interested, again, check below for the details below, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and let us know what you'd like to hear more. So thanks again, Mel, for joining us. And it's been so lovely to have you. Always great to chat with you. And look forward to catching you all on the next episode. See you later. Bye.